Hello everybody, nice to see you all again. Welcome back to my exercise yard at the back of the cottage. Father Mark asked me to do one or two things about saints that we're celebrating. Could I say something about them? And my first reaction was to say no, because coming now into this lockdown, I've got no books with me, or very few books, and particularly the Oxford Book of Saints, which are Oxford Dictionary of Saints, which I find extremely useful. But I did bring this book with me. This is the Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church. It's a very big book, and it reminds me of the priest who used to teach us church history. He had loads and loads and loads of books, and he used to say, never be afraid of books, eh? Never be afraid of books. Never be afraid of big books. Well, I'm not afraid of big books, and this book certainly is a great help, because I want to talk today something about John of Beverly. Now, I don't think St. John of Beverly will have been ever heard of by very many people. Certainly outside Beverly, hardly any at all. But in his day, he was a very, very popular bishop, and after his death, although he was reputed to have worked some miracles, but still he, not outstandingly a miracle worker, but he was a very, very popular saint right up to the time of the Reformation. In fact, King Henry V, he is reputed to have attributed his victory at Agincourt, which is one of the great battles against the French that he won. He always attributed that to the intercession of John of Beverly. So we'll just say something about it. When did he live? Well, about the same time as St. Bede, and so a little bit younger, say, than Benedict Biscop, who founded the monastery there at Monk Wearmouth in the year 674. He was one of 5 monks who became bishops. This is John Beverly. He became a bishop from the monastery, St. Hilda's monastery at Whitby. Whitby is very famed for the Synod of Whitby, where they decided then that the two traditions that were growing up in this country, the Celtic tradition from the north, which came from St. Aidan, and the southern tradition, the Roman tradition, coming from St. Augustine of Canterbury. So there were sort of two traditions about all sorts of things, and it was decided that we would follow only one, and we'd follow the Roman one. And of course, this created a good deal of tension up in the north of England, and a bit of difficulty for a few years. By the time John of Beverly became Bishop of Hexham, things had calmed down, and so he didn't have that trouble to worry about. So, how did he become a bishop? Well, he would be chosen by the king. This idea of it, the Pope appointing bishops, this is only a relatively recent thing in the church. Previous to that, there would be elected, but very often the king, somebody in the government, whoever was governing, they would appoint the bishop, and then the other bishops would consecrate him, who would ordain him as a bishop, and that would happen to St. John of Beverly. So he became Bishop of Hexham, and then later the king decided he should become Bishop of York. York was a very important bishopric in the area, the centre of the church really in the north of England. So he became Bishop of York, even though at the time there was a bishop there. It was Bishop Wilfrid. But Bishop Wilfrid was having a dispute with somebody. He was always having disputes, and he was absent actually. Although he hadn't been appointed, he wouldn't have been appointed by Rome. In the dispute, he went to Rome to get the dispute settled, and Rome declared in his favour. So he came back to claim that he was Archbishop or Bishop of York. And he became, but somebody then persuaded him, probably the king, persuaded him it would be a good idea to leave John there in York, and that's where John stayed. Meanwhile, Wilfrid went off and he became Bishop of Hexham. So John of Beverly then stayed in York, and then retired back to the monastery, but not to Whitby. He had founded the monastery at Beverly, and that's where he spent the last part of his days, and he died there. Now, how was it then that he became a saint, as it were? Because in fact, that's all he did. He was a bishop, and he founded Beverly. But basically, he became a saint because he was a very good bishop. He was a good preacher and teacher. He studied, prepared everything. So he went around teaching. He also cared for people, and he was very, very, very good to the poor. In other words, he did the things that a bishop was expected to do, and he did them well. He did them very well, extraordinarily well. And so, because of that, then he was venerated as a bishop, as a saintly bishop, for so many years, doing the ordinary things extraordinarily well. So, where does that leave us? Well, here we are. We have a crisis on our hands at the moment. We can't do all sorts of extraordinary things. Some people, of course, are called to do extraordinary things. Well, most of us are in lockdown, and we can't do very much. But we can do the ordinary things, looking after ourselves and saying our prayers and doing everything. We have the opportunity to do them extraordinarily well. So that's what I recommend that we do. Keep on doing those things extraordinarily well. God bless you all.